Hi guys, I want to do a little video, hopefully 10 minutes or less. I'll try to go as fast as I can just to kind of catch us up and make sure that we're all on the same page in this course of human growth and development. One of the reasons that I had you respond to the first discussion question, wanting to know, why you were taking this course, is because this is a pre-professional course. Now, I know it's listed under our general education, but for many people, this is a pre-professional course. For some of you in the medical field, like our nursing, radiography, this is a foundation course. And I find that a lot of the students who take human growth and development actually need this as part of their degree. So when you kind of sit down and think, okay, why do I need this course? Why am I taking human growth and development and when it's one of the first courses that I need? You're going to be dealing with everything human. That is the foundation of what you're going to be working with in your career field. And so when we think about, human growth from, conception to death, womb to tomb, so to speak, this kind of sets the stage for all of the different fields that you're going to be going in. Many of you, based on your responses, are here in our pre-professional nursing program, radiography. And this will help you to set some stage as far as how humans change and develop through each of those different stages. If you're in education majors need this course. Psychology majors need this course. So I've found teaching this course through the years that most students who take it kind of an idea what they want to go into. And I think that's important. I think when you know you need a course, you have a different perspective and a different mindset about that course. So some of the things that we have discussed so far, when you look at your beginning readings, it's like, why do we actually study human growth and development? And one of the main words that always keep in mind, in fact, if anybody asks you, why are you taking human growth? You need to say the word change. It is about changes from the time conception takes place until the very end. Every single thing that you're going to be reading in every single chapter deals with change. And not only change, but a pattern. How can we look at those patterns of movements? How do we know what happens in prenatal development will affect that child as a neonate, that first month of life? And from a neonate, how is that going to affect that child as an infant? So it's a sequential stage. So we look for changes and we look for patterns. And it gives us direction. If we know something happens within the first month of life, what patterns or movements can we see all through infancy? So this is an important class because you are looking at those movements of change, those patterns of change, and what's going to happen next. If anybody asks me, I have a 6-year-old and what do I expect? Well, I can respond many different ways. Is it going to be a cognitive response? Is it going to be an emotional response? Is it going to be a biological response? So what you have learned so far is why we actually study development, and that's the main foundation, is those changes, those changes throughout the lifespan. It is important that we develop theories. When you went into your next reading, you read a lot of theories. We have theorists that have our foundation theorists. In fact, my doctoral dissertation, it was surrounded by Vygotsky. Vygotsky was in and out all through my entire dissertation. He was very well known. He is still known today. He is a cultural psychologist, a cultural child psychologist, and he believed, just to give you an example, that culture influences a lot of who you are today. That's why I gave you that question on your critical thinking exercise. If you had been raised in a different culture, how would you be different today? Is there things about yourself developmentally that would be different? And definitely because of language. And when you think about simple things like sensitive periods and critical periods and language, there's huge developmental milestones that set the stage for development for the rest of that person's life. So we have all those theorists because you must surround yourself in these theoretical frameworks for us to go out and actually study a specific stage. So make sure you're familiar with why we actually study it, the patterns or the stages, so you would know from infancy to early, middle, late childhood, adolescence, all the way through. That's going to set your foundation. Those theorists are very important. You're going to start seeing those theorists throughout your readings now. You're going to start seeing Piaget, Vygotsky. You're going to start seeing Freud, so we're going to bring Freud into that. So these are solid foundations. So make sure you understand each of those different areas. And they're going to either be divided up biologically, either going to be divided up cognitively, like how we think, or also social, emotional, or psychosocial development. So you're going to see that throughout that pattern as well. Some of the things that you need to understand when I look at biological beginnings, the genetics are huge. Genetic counseling, genetic research, that is a huge amount of funding that's going on right now. Back in the 90s, the Human Genome Project was developed. Some of you have had your DNA tested. And now that we know we have at least 92% of our DNA sequenced, we can go back and we can look at congenital disorders. We can look at cancers. We can look at, how those genes are turned on and how that affects you later on in life. I'm in the clinical field as a clinician, and we do have certain onsets for disorders. My students just asked me that last class, and we know that we have childhood disorders, we have adolescent issues, and then we have our adult disorders. So somebody says to me, when does schizophrenia develop? We know that based on our research, but we also know human stages. So developmental psychologists give us a lot of information for every other field. So in that one area of your readings, you learned a little bit about how your genes do affect you and affect your development. What have you been born with? What traits that you're going to see now and maybe you're going to see in the future? So have an understanding of that. Also have an understanding of prenatal care. We have a lot of issues going on in our society right now where infants are born with fetal alcohol syndrome. They're born addicted to heroin. We have a huge opioid epidemic going on. How is that going to affect that child's development through the rest of their life? If they were addicted to Loratabs or Oxycontin or fentanyl, how has that rewire their brain? How is that going to affect their cognitive development? How is that going to affect their emotional development as they age and they go through something like puberty? How would that affect that? So every little variable or every little aspect or agent out there that can affect that development, we study that. So that's important to know. And then also too, just the basic prenatal development and how it actually develops. Anytime between that 37 to 42 week, during that special time, what can affect that overall development? So as that child progresses, we can see that later on. Have an understanding in chapter 4, and you start your readings. Look at that birth cycle. That birth cycle are the birthing stages. Make sure you know that. Some students do get mixed up with that. So you kind of follow the pictures. Know when the first stage ends and the second stage begins. The moment that baby's head is crowning, the moment that baby's head moves through that cervix, stage 1 is done. And the woman needs to be dilated. We look at about 10 centimeters of dilation. So the woman needs to be dilated. I think some students get that mixed up where they say, oh, the woman is starting to dilate. No. You want to be dilated when that baby's head goes through the cervix. Stage 2 is the baby going through the birth canal and the emergence of that child. And stage 3, of course, is after birth. And that usually lasts 5 to 30 minutes. So make sure you know the stages of birth. That's going to be important. I'm going to have a couple of questions on that. The first month of life is neonate. What happens with those neonates? So be familiar with fontanelles and lanugo. There's certain aspects of that neonate that we see, and those are protective factors. And then, of course, we get into infancy. So we're moving right along. So far, that's what you've read. So make sure that you know why we study human development, some of our theorists and their frameworks, know a little bit about the genetics, like XX or XY, male or female, and then know a little bit about some of the teratogens or those agents that can cause prenatal concerns. And then, of course, the actual stages of birth in that first month of life. Be familiar with the Apgar scale and the Brazelton scale. So, why do we do those exams before that child is released into the family's care? So that's kind of where we are right now. We're going to start into that infancy. Infancy is huge. I mean, that's some of the most important developmental milestones of being a human happen within the first 2 years of life. That sets the stage. So pay attention to little things like the self, identification of self, self-awareness, development of the emotions, development of personality. Personality is going to be coming in. The maturation, what is that infant doing the first year of life? If you can kind of gather that concept, you're going to be on the right track. And I'll probably just keep doing a couple of videos, probably maybe by stages, kind of say, okay, here's what's infancy, this is what's happening in childhood. So that way, I'm making sure that you're taking in the information, continue with those critical thinking exercises. That kind of helps you to translate that information and put it into your own words, and I think you're going to do a fantastic job. So I may do another video, maybe I'll just keep doing them, maybe through all the different stages, and that way you have some idea of what you really need to know as you progress through your degree. Because again, for many of you, you're pre-professionals, and this is questions that you're going to be asked, and so you want to make sure you give the right information to everyone. So great job on the first critical thinking exercise. I look forward to the second one, and this has been a great class so far. So good job, guys.